Hey, first, I just want to say I'm glad I'm not a judge. There's a lot of really great stuff that I saw up here tonight, and the ability to do a 1-minute pitch.
So hard.
Yeah, and several of them just nailed it, like right on the beat.
Yeah,
I thought that was
exactly.
great. So, you may remember from the very beginning of the evening when Stacey was introduced, and they said some things about what she does and where she came from and all that kind of thing. But the thing that, I mean, yeah, she worked at Google, and yeah, she worked at Adidas, who acquired her company that was very successful. All that's important. But what I want us to explore is your time at Purdue.
Yes.
So, I have to warn everybody. So I interviewed Stacey last year for a program that is always referred to as the old master. And I told her at the time I would not refer to her as an old master. She's more like an experienced Jedi. And so, you know, we're not going to call her old master. But, you know, so you're here, you're on campus. Tell us about, you know, the first time you were on campus.
Yeah, well, you know, I grew up in West Lafayette, so this was like right in my backyard. My dad worked at Purdue University, so I just always thought I would come here and go to school. I went into the engineering program, not really knowing too much about what engineers do, but I really like chemistry, I really like math. I thought, you know, sounds good. I lived in Shreve Hall my first year, and after that I lived in a little apartment underneath what is now Fuse over by Mackey Arena. So that was the vibe. It was some very cold winters while I was here, and I did not have good attendance in my classes during the cold weather.
Was it your preference to attend classes at those times?
At what time?
At any of those times when it was cold? You were just like, no, I'm going to stay home.
I stayed home a lot of times. You know, school, the engineering curriculum here was rough, and maybe because I did not always attend classes, but I struggled quite a bit through the program. I got through it, but it was kind of messy. I started out in chemical engineering. Midway through my sophomore year, I realized like that wasn't my thing. I liked chemistry, but that wasn't really chemical engineering. And I discovered one summer I was working over at Michael Golden Labs, which I think has been knocked down now. Over by Potter Library, which I think might have been knocked down as well. That I really was more of an applied thinker. When I can see mechanical systems, when I can see machinery, then it all starts making sense to me. So it really took until I got into my junior and senior year before I really was actually enjoying my classes. And I did not have a great sense of confidence when I was at school that I was particularly academically oriented, or that I would have a good career after I left. I didn't leave Purdue with a great deal of confidence, let's just say this, in terms of my engineering studies. But I knew I was creative, I knew I could think on my feet, I could really like imagine and visualize systems, and I was fairly cross-disciplined, so we didn't really have programs like the entrepreneurial focus here.
Yeah.
Foundry wasn't here,
Right.
Anvil. There wasn't really a place for people to think about technology and apply it to business or solutions, but that's really where I started to find my groove once I got into the workplace. I started out in sales and then found that I liked the business side of technology more than the technology creation.
Yeah. Was there any thinking when you were in school that you would start something? Did that occur to you?
No, it really didn't. While I was here, I thought I would solve problems. I thought I would, help customers. I didn't really know what work would be like, but I do know this. When I got into the workplace, I knew those moments when I had like sort of an aha observation of when, the solution just clicked, and I started to gravitate towards those business development areas where I could really see a problem and think about the solution and try to articulate, like, how do we create a business out of this? Much like what everybody here is doing with, like, the big idea. How do you start with the idea, take it down to proof of concept, and really prove if you've got some, something that's valuable. And that's what it's going to be like out in the work world. Whether you're solving a problem and pitching your idea, on a daily basis to your coworkers or your manager, or whether you think you've got this big idea that you think merits investing your time, your money, other people's money in an idea that you think can really grow and turn into something bigger than just the dream.
It's not a stretch, I don't think, to say that you're one of sort of the parents of the wearables world. I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't exist when you went into it, which is phenomenally amazing, right? How on earth did you get into that?
Yeah, I had one of those moments, probably like a lot of you when you're thinking of your idea. I was working in the textile industry. Somebody planted the seed around what could we do to create next generation textiles, and a small group of researchers were looking at how to incorporate wires and sensors into fabrics. And when I heard that, like, something just clicked with me in terms of, wow, the body is covered with fabric. When we can bring technology close to the body, imagine what we can do with it. And it just fired my imagination in terms of the possibility. This was just at that moment in time where people, were still wearing pagers, and the mobile phone was quite big, but things were getting smaller and closer to the body. So you could just start to see the possibility of bringing sensors, particularly for me, it was medical grade sensors, close to the person. And so wearable technology in the form factor of clothing. I worked on initially this EKG monitoring sports bra. So we knit these electrodes into the garment, picked up the EKG signal, and I remember just like being blown away by, like, oh my God, we can get medical quality signal from a consumer product, if you will. And that's what started like this long fascination with how do we mate together the materials, the human form, the signal. And at first it was kind of a fun exploration of, like, is this possible? Can we make it work? And then one day, I would say probably about 12 years ago, I had this aha when a doctor said, the type of data that we're starting to collect on these simple, like, novelty wrist devices, these weren't even like a legitimate product category at the time. If we have enough of that data, enough longitudinal data with fine enough granularity, we can predict weeks in advance of a heart attack, days in advance of a stroke, hours in advance of a seizure. And I remember just like the hair stood up on the back of my neck when I started thinking about the possibilities of what great good we could do for people and the potential ability to transform healthcare. So that's been like my North Star through my startup, through Adidas, thinking about like the health and the health use case. Sports was a great detour because sports is where a lot of early adopters are. It's a non-regulated market. You can prove out technology there, but I was always thinking health. And that's been sort of a 12-year quest to get the category to where it is now. And you're now starting to see on these smartwatches and devices, the EKG sensors, the SpO2 sensors, blood pressure will come about soon enough. We're really getting these medical grade signals. And it'll take another 12 years before the real potential of the daily use case, the health use case of these devices. So that'll be, long after I'm done working, it'll continue to advance. But, just plugging away at it and solving problems 1 year at a time, and like having a conviction of and seeing where you think it can go and just trying to keep pushing it.
That's great. I'm struck by this notion, right, of there's a thing out there, it's where you really want to go.
Yeah.
But the practicality of being able to get to the market you can get to, where the early adopters are, where there's not regulatory pressure, right, to be able to prove those things out. But always looking, at that big picture, that really important problem that you want to solve. Thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that's right. It's just like a series of steps and progress. I always looked at several different, kind of tangential industries. When I was in sports, I often looked to what was happening in medical devices, what was happening in military. A lot of great technology is incubated through the military side of things. And now, when I'm a little more oriented in the health side, I still look to military and I still look back to sports. And so you kind of have to think about where the innovation leaders are in areas that might not be directly in the space that you're in, but you can marry cool technology from other areas in your field.
Yeah. So you were working with this group of researchers on this initial thing, right? How did your startup happen in connection to that?
So we spent maybe 2 years inside a big company building all sorts of prototypes, just trying things, what would work. We have closets and rooms of prototypes. And then eventually we hit on something that we thought had some commercial potential. Okay, I actually brought some of my earliest samples. Can I?
Oh,
can I
please, that would be fantastic.
I wanted to show you the evolution. I'm somewhat prepared, though. I was kind of hoping you were going to ask me this question.
Absolutely.
So
we didn't set any of this up.
No. So remember I said, my startup did an EKG monitoring sports bra as an example. So kind of what started it is we were working on ideas, and we saw, Polar, some of the heart monitoring guys, they have a sports bra in which you thread the black Polar chest strap. Okay, nobody likes that. We're in the lab, and we had this A6 brand. We had a CAD file on this A6 sport bra, and we thought, well, I wonder if we can put some conductive thread into the pattern and almost create a stripe or a polka dot. So we started playing around just on the machines, knitting this gray material as a conductive silver thread. We're wow, maybe we should think about the electrodes as dots and stripes, because that's how the production equipment works. So we took an A6 pattern. We then started building these really crude electrodes, and so we're just playing around, right? And then we finally get to this working prototype right here that we started calling it Textronics, and we knit the electrodes right on the inside, and we're well, snaps, let's just use snaps to connect the hardware. And eventually that turned into, this is Lululemon's version of the garment. It's got the dark color is the textile electrodes, and this is what we took through FDA for 510K. We used the sticky electrodes as our predicate device to prove that we had the efficacy. And then this is what Adidas turned it into. It gets a little more consumerish, and the electronics are green, and you're making it very consumer friendly. But it's probably not unlike, and these are the electrodes on the inside, but this progression is not unlike what you do in a lab. You've just got an idea, you're sketching it out, you're hand sewing things in my world, or you're hand building things. And then you start finding the production equipment and kind of scaling it up. But I mean, this is the entrepreneur's version that kind of eventually makes its way into the consumer place. But they're crude at first, and then you refine it and perfect it as you go. Yeah.
Those are great. Thanks so much for bringing that.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. So you came out of this big company, Textronics, kind of did their thing. Obviously, you ended up, being acquired by Adidas. And then you were at Adidas for 9 years, right?
Yeah.
What was there a moment when you went from thinking, I am an entrepreneur, to thinking, I am a corporate person?
I still think of myself as an entrepreneur, but I appreciate the size and scale and resources of large corporations, because that's how you get your technology to more and more people. I knew there was a point in time as an entrepreneur where we had like reached the limitation of what we could do as a small company, and with my company, we could make the product, it worked well, but we didn't have distribution. We could not globally distribute product to Dick's Sporting Goods or Lululemon or, you know, wherever we needed to take it. So that's when you kind of have that moment where you realize, okay, now's the time to try to get acquired or sell, because we've kind of like peaked out with what we could likely do as on our own.
That makes sense. So now you're at Google. And I guess the thing that I'm most interested in there, without obviously asking you to divulge anything that would be confidential, but what I wonder is actually sort of a big picture question. That is, in your world at Google, how much of your time, in your team's time, is internal R&D kind of work, and how much is interfacing with other folks who are the equivalent of Textronics back in the day?
Yeah.
Is that a fair question?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, at a place like Google, most of your time ends up being internally focused because you're trying to sell what you're doing to the other parts of the company. Because when you can get everybody harnessed and coordinated, which takes a lot of effort, then you can make things happen at a really big scale. But for me personally, I love the time spent focused on the outside. So I usually just dedicate my Fridays to reading, calling people, talking to folks in my network that I haven't talked to before, sometimes reaching out to entrepreneurs. I like to go to conferences and trade shows just to see what's out there. And for me, the area that I'm really excited about now, that doesn't have really anything to do with Google, but it is a continuation of my love affair with wearables, is I'm now looking at implantables, the small subdermal sensors. So we're now starting to see consumer use of the continuous glucose monitor beyond diabetics using it to dose insulin. We're starting to see companies in Europe use that sensor for performance athletes, for weight loss programs, etc. I'm seeing some really cool technology that almost look like little snips of dental floss that are very small sensors that are injected in a saline solution under the skin to monitor tissue oxygenation or blood lactate levels, etc. So those are really intriguing. And there's a little Medtronic sensor that people with AFib experience, but they're now starting to use those with soldiers. I'm like, wow, I wonder if this data that we're collecting about our health and our changing health status can be so impactful on our health journey that we're willing to put something under our skin and have it there permanently. Those are the kinds of things I think about. I mean, it has to be a really valuable use case for someone to want to do that. But I think there's that potential to have that on body all the time sensor to help us see that progression over the arc of our life. And of course, as I get older, as my parents are aging and I'm seeing and feeling my own health change, I'm like, yep, I think this is something that, I'd be willing to use. So anyway, I'm kind of fascinated with that right now.
Well, and there's a whole aging population, right, who
every day,
who needs that, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned the continuous glucose thing. I follow very closely Super Sapiens.
Oh, yeah.
Because I actually know Phil Sutherland, because his first startup was a cycling team called Team Type 1. And I met him back in the day, right? So I about once a week I say, when are you coming to America, right? Because it's only available in Europe.
Yes, there are some companies in the US that are in that space, maybe a little.
Yeah, their deal is, they partnered with Abbott on Libre use, and so for them, it's important that they, and that was their actual first relationship back at Team Type 1. Abbott was their first bike sponsor.
Oh, that's such a cool company.
Yeah. So, anyway, but yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth to the, what are we willing to give up, right? Having something injected into my body or implanted, and what am I going to get in return for it?
Yeah.
And then I think, the question is, what trade-offs are consumers willing to make? I don't know the answer, but.
Exactly. I mean, it was kind of cool to see the number of med tech ideas in this pitch competition. And, those are hard paths, but really impactful if you can pull it off. And I like a lot of the thinking around solving a lot of these big health problems that many of you were focused on in the competition. So, that one thought I would have is if there's any way that you can do a consumer version of your technology to sort of prove it out and create some traction. I was thinking about, I can't remember, what was the heart, the
Biogen heart.
Yes. Yeah, do you have any ideas on what you could make that might be non-medical that could, help you with scale up and get some traction there? So.
Yeah, so we have two bars. One is B2B and one is B2C.
Huh.
So we manufacture the bio ink mainly for the pharma companies. So about 1 liter of the bio ink costs about $1 million. And then I've spoken to multiple billion-dollar pharma companies, and they said that it shouldn't be a problem. It actually helps them a lot to cut down costs. Because let's say an average drug to be discovered by a pharma company takes about 4 years. I'm about to bring it down from 4 years to 1 month, just from using that ink, testing on that ink.
Cool.
Fascinating. It's amazing to me the number of health-related items that come out in a competition like this, the business model competition, startups that come through the foundry. Given that we don't have a medical school, right? If you look at the big company, or the big universities who are doing things in the health space, they almost all have a medical school. I think it's a big part of the strength of the biomedical engineering program here,
exactly.
And the fact that we're not training doctors who want to cure a disease. We're training engineers who want to solve the problem.
Exactly. Right? It's the material science, it's the devices, the sensors. What do we do with the data? I mean, for you, it's
Yeah, especially now with the data mine and the data analysis programs at Cranard.
Yeah.
So I'm out of questions. But do you have anything else you want to share? Special? Anything?
Well, I would like to first thank and appreciate all of you for participating in the competition, and to also just really dig in with that sense of with a spirit of resilience. When you're quote competing, right? It implies there's winners. It implies that there's those that don't quote score as well by judging competitions. But I would not let any of this dissuade you if you think you're onto a great idea, right? I mean, a lot of what happens in your career and in your innovation and in your entrepreneurial life also has a lot to do with luck and timing and sort of the persistence. You mentioned the fact that I've been in Wearable so long, and I think of myself more as a survivor in that new area rather than, wow, I did something so smart and great to, that differentiated me. Much of it had to do with luck and the evolution of a technology. Are you there at the right time? Because if you're there too early, sometimes that's sad. If you're there too late, it's sad. And every once in a while, you just hit it right from a timing perspective. So don't be discouraged if you know, if your first idea isn't the winner, or if the judges don't think that like that's the winning idea, that often has nothing to do with whether you're gonna be successful or not. Sometimes it's just persistence and just continuing to take steps and be, you know, flexible enough with your idea that you recognize when an industry is changing, an innovation pipeline is changing, the market is changing, the competition is changing. Make sure that you roll with that and sort of evolve and iterate your products and your ideas as you go, because you often end up doing something in your business life or your entrepreneurial life that wasn't what you expected at the beginning. So that evolution and resilience is pretty important.
Yeah, you say often that happens, I say always that happens. Right? So, well, thank you so much for being here. I don't know if you're ready. What?
We want to open it to the audience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, are there questions for Stacey? They don't need to go through me, they can just ask you.
Me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on that ending note, when you were in year one, or maybe even prior to Textronics, what was your mindset and your view of the future of the company, your product then, and when you ended up selling it to Adidas? How was it different then, or how did it end up differently than what you had initially anticipated?
When we started the company, I think we were just thrilled and enamored with the technology. We were so excited about the making, the innovation, the prototyping. Probably about 6 months in, our venture capitalist said, okay, how are you gonna make money? Like, you guys have prototyped just so much. Like, what's your business model? Like, they really kind of put the thumb screws to us in terms of like, pick something and take it to market. And that's when we we're a little startled by that, to be quite honest. I think we were maybe naive entrepreneurs. But then we went into an exercise of, okay, of all the things we can make, what's the fastest path to market? What's the fastest way that we can demonstrate the value of some of the technology that we have? We picked sports apparel because we could make it. We knew there was no regulation. We knew there was a small market of runners that wear chest straps. We're like, okay, we can do that one. We set up a website. We gave ourselves a brand name. It wasn't a very good one in hindsight, but we, made a decent looking website that looked like we had a little more heft than we actually had, and we started selling product. And that was the momentum that then set the company on its, on its path and its trajectory. And that's what put us in that line of sports apparel is ultimately then what put us in on the radar of Adidas, who happened to be wanting to develop like the fitness community, the lifestyle, the coaching, the performance sport elevation. And they were having trouble with the sensor side of it, so that's how like the matchmaking happened. But that's not at all what we thought we were going to be doing at the beginning. We thought we were going to be selling components, materials, wiring harnesses, flexible wiring harnesses to business partners. We didn't imagine that we were going to do a line of consumer clothing, smart clothing. So that was a really fun journey that pivoted multiple times.
Do I just partner with people who know things about coding and AI, or is there something that I can do personally to improve my knowledge about the same?
One of the things I've found really useful in business, particularly when you're talking about, there's a specialized set of skills and you don't have those skills. But what you might have is, if that's an area that's interesting to you, industries and technologies need people with that mindset of, how do I translate this technology into something that a consumer or a user will understand. And I have an engineering background, but I often found myself in those types of jobs where I was working with the technologists thinking about, okay, how do we take this technology and turn it into something that is understandable and useful to the consumer? Because sometimes the AI experts and the coders don't have a really good handle of what the consumer or user need is. So, you know, in my world, like the user experience people often sit between the consumer and the coders or the AI experts. So, you know, find your role and your place in that. It's almost like a supply chain of technology, right? There's the people that are really good and deep with the technology, and then those that turn it into a business and figure out how to monetize it and deliver high quality, valuable value proposition, enhancing, you know, solutions to consumers. So don't feel like, don't worry too much about what you can't do, but, you know, identify what that sweet spot is for you in terms of where you sit in that continuum of all the things that need to happen to take something from like concept to consumer. Like, where's your sweet spot? And then really like focus on finding those opportunities or matches in jobs or career that take advantage of what part of that process you like to do.
Thank you.
Do you see any like overarching themes or specifics that you see help or make one stand out in terms of companies delivering products?
You're asking what makes a company stand out in this health space?
Yeah, health spaces.
Yeah. I think with driving health outcomes, right? Does the product work, and does the product help someone on their health journey, their wellness journey? And often right now, the real motivator is, and does it reduce the cost of care? You had mentioned how interesting it is that we see so many health-oriented companies or startups here, even though Purdue doesn't have a medical school. I think one of the reasons that there's so much interest in the health space is it's, you know, a multi-trillion-dollar industry with loads of waste in it. I mean, it's still an art in many ways, right? And so I think the fact that there's waste in the system, inefficiency in health, and there's that much money, opens up a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurial, innovative solutions to, one, help consumers drive health outcomes or reduce the cost of care. And I think if you can do either one of those two things, driving the outcome or reducing the cost of care, then you've got something that's really attractive to those that pay the bills for, whether it's governments, self-insured employers, insurance companies, or consumers that pay the cost of their own health care. Then you've got like a kind of a very compelling opportunity.
So considering Google is such a massive corporate and they can actually impact so many lives, how is Google going to come into like health sector? Considering Apple, which already has smart wearables and has a lot of data points in health field, so how is Google going to like, what would be the product that Google is planning to build that can help so many users?
Well, I can't tell you all the stuff going on.
Some major products maybe, something that's really standing on.
Yeah, I mean, there's been products that have been commercialized recently. The Nest products have a series of surfaces in the home. Most recently, there's the Home Hub that has a sleep sensor in it, so that's giving you a sense in the morning of your sleep quality. Google recently acquired Fitbit, so that's one of the avenues in which we can bring innovation in the wearable space. You'll also read articles about the use of AI, for example, with imaging technology to help improve the diagnosis of radiology scans or retinal images. So using a lot of that interesting camera or machine vision technology to, you know, improve improve diagnoses are examples of some of the areas, but you know, it is often around the use of how do we help consumers collect and aggregate all of their health data and have it in one place so that they or their doctor can provide or can gain more useful insights from that data. So the mingling of consumer-generated data, whether it's from a smart scale or from a wearable or your home bedside hub, with your electronic health records. So if you choose to bring all those data sets together, those are the types of ways that Google can contribute to the use of the health data. As I mentioned to a couple of the teams here, the health records data is very messy. There's not really a standardized format for it here in the US. So that's a problem that a lot of people are trying to challenge, or a challenge that a lot of people or companies are trying to solve. But those are the types of big system areas that Google and many other companies are trying to address some of the inefficiencies in the healthcare system. Yeah.
Well, it looked to me like the judges had
Did they
re-entered the
know?
room. So, big hand for Stacey, thanks for coming.